Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. I think it's an overpromise to just claim that this is the most exciting component of the session. We've heard a lot of great talks on papers that have been recently published in Heart. And as the editor-in-chief of the Heart, I'd just like to give a brief introduction about what we are about and how we make decisions. I've taken over as the editor-in-chief of the Heart just at the beginning of this year from Catherine Otto, who was spearheading the journal for about a decade. And during this time, she really strengthened the position of Heart as one of the world's most esteemed cardiovascular journals. The journal is also supported by the BMJ Publishing and the British Cardiovascular Society, which have set the highest standards for medical publishing and promoting Heart nationally and internationally. And as you know, in current times, is keeping the ethical standards of publishing high is quite important. And for that, you need to have a reliable source that would assess the journal, the papers based on the scientific merit as opposed to any other considerations. I often get asked about some of the metrics of the journals, and those are being listed here. The impact factor 5.1, the journal impact factor rank 38 out of 202 cardiac and cardiovascular systems journals with a site score of 10.3. I mean, these metrics are important to just keep in mind, but as everyone that I speak with it attests, those numbers do not necessarily give a relative good reflection of journal standing. That is in part because some of the other cardiovascular journals impact factor, which is in my view a flawed metric, is driven by publication of society guidelines that inflates the impact factor. And the impact factor of the paper, many would argue, should be taken by the impact of the paper itself. Nonetheless, this is an indicator that we should keep in mind, and we're working hard to just keep it on an upwards trajectory in the coming years. We are quite fast in reaching decisions from the time of first decision for papers that undergo an external peer review, 27 days, and acceptance to online publication, 22 days median. The journal has quite a wide international reach with an annual content view of about 2 million, annual Altmetric mentions of 19.3 thousand, and total social media followers of 71,000. So now looking into the future as a strategic direction of the journal in the coming years, we aim to position Heart as the premier journal for publishing and accessing high quality cardiovascular journal, and I'm here to gain your support on our journey towards that goal. As one of the changes that I have made since I've taken over is to increase the breadth of the type of articles that we publish, with having a dedicated commissioning team where we actively seek papers that could stimulate debate, inform clinical work, but also scientific research, including opinion papers and state-of-the-art reviews. Reflecting also the international reach of the journal, we have been working to increase geographical diversity of the journal, and I will mention a bit about that, with the editorial team consisting of members from all continents. You've heard already some examples of proteomics research. We need to be mindful that cardiovascular research is a highly dynamic field, and we see a lot of innovation. And as a researcher myself, I have been sometimes challenged and frustrated by not getting the expert review that some of our papers might have deserved because of the traditional way that journals have been operating. To just mitigate that risk, we have been bringing on experts on our editorial team with knowledge in digital health, multiomics, and AI in particular, to be able to better assess the quality of the work that is submitted in those fields, understanding that these are going to be emerging fields in cardiovascular medicine. And we have been seeking proactively research from leading institutions across the world, including in China. And this is my second visit this year to China to engage with people and understand the work that they're doing and hopefully promote it through our journal. I mentioned earlier about the editorial composition, reflecting the importance of the publications that are coming from China. I'm pleased to say that we have two associate editors that I'm sure you all will know in the audience. Two associate editors from China, Professor Junbei Ge from Fudan University in Shanghai, and Professor Zijing Zheng from Guangdong Academy of Medical Sciences in Guangzhou, who have been helping greatly with the journal, not only in terms of assessing the best science that is coming from China, but generally, to be able to understand the sciences and publications that we are receiving from across the world, its relevance globally and to China. Yeah, I'm presenting some of the metrics of the submissions that we receive, and you can see the number of submissions broken down by country, and for China in particular over the past few years. Overall, we receive about 1,600 submissions per year. These are original articles, and about a third of those are from China. And as you see in the table in the bottom section, those numbers have been increasing. The pattern that has been quite consistent is that despite the growing number of publications from China, the acceptance rate for those papers has been lower than some other regions. But when you look at the table here to the right, you just see that, by no means China is an exception. That applies to many other countries with the exception of UK and United States. But I'm pleased to say that the recent statistics show that the acceptance rates for China has also been increasing. And that is a reflection of the growing quality and impact of the work that is coming. If we look at the reasons for rejection of papers from China, and these are the most recent statistics from January to September 2024, the most common reason is that the papers have been deemed to have insufficiently robust methodology for the journal, or the paper does not add enough to what is already known on the topic, with the next reason being low editorial priority. So if I look at this breakdown of the reasons for rejections, I'd like to just stress that this is pretty much the same for all regions. This is not unique to China. And that shows the importance of us assessing the merit of the paper based on its scientific impact. Those falling into category of low editorial priority sometimes tend to be papers where the authors have not checked the scope of the journal, and they tend to be slightly out of the scope of what we would consider of relevant. And if you're interested to know where the papers from China are coming from, this is the leading institutions with the publications, the top one being the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences and the Peking Union Medical College, followed by Fuwai Hospital, and we had already one presentation from Fuwai this morning, and West China Hospital of Xizhuang University, and so on. So these are statistics from the past few years. This is changing, and as I've said, the numbers are growing. But I put this slide here to just show that the average citations of the papers that do get into the journal are decent and range from 35 to something in the order of 20. And the topics that those papers cover, this cloud diagram shows that really it covers all areas in cardiovascular medicine. I won't go into details of it. In terms of the impact of the papers from China over the past few years, there have been a total of 140,000 article views with an average of 23 citations per article, as I've said earlier. That is higher than the journal on average. That shows the indication of the papers that we have been selecting from China to be published in the journal. And they tend to have a higher altmetric score, with an example given here of a study that looked at fried food consumption and risk of cardiovascular disease, published in 2020. Now, a question that I often ask is, how do we prioritize what we publish in the journal? Assuming that people have checked the scope of the journal and the paper broadly falls into the category of what we would consider as relevant, there are really three questions that tend to go through my mind, and I'm pretty sure that is the case for most other editors when we assess the papers, is the why and the what and the how. For a paper to be considered as a priority for publication in Heart, I'd like to see that it has sufficient novelty or originality. The results of the paper should be important to clinical decision-making or public health, and the paper should have a potential to making an impact. And of course, the paper needs to be clear in terms of what it wants to convey as a message, and clear in terms of the methods that is adopted for testing the research question. Of course, not all papers will hit very high ranking on all those 3 points, but on average, we would want to see them to be high on these 3 criterion. Now, once the paper gets accepted, we do our best to promote it nationally and internationally. The audience from China is growing with 91,000 page views, 51,000 users, and this is the third highest source of user traffic after UK and the US. We've got a very popular podcast with interviews with authors of selected papers in Heart. For instance, the example here given, the salt substitutes study led by a group in China, which has been very popular. There are other author services that we offer to just make the life of researchers easier. One thing that we have introduced, for instance, is the screening of the papers after submission by the editor-in-chief before it's checked by the technical team. This is to avoid the problem that authors are asked commonly to just format the papers, which may take a few days for them to do, only to hear a few days later that this is an immediate reject without going on the peer review. To just avoid that, we will first look at the scientific merit of the paper before we look at any technical aspects of it. There are other services that we provide, including the transfer of articles to Open Heart and other platforms as listed here, that I will skip through in interest of time. We're here to hear your feedback and any suggestions. We consider yourself as a community. We all have different roles as researchers, as clinicians, as reviewers, and some of us as editors. So we would like it to work for you when you consider publishing your paper in Heart. And these are the contact details for myself or the journal if you wish to get in touch. And final thing to just say that I'd encourage you, if you have not already subscribed to the email alerts of the journal, it's just a few clicks to just get the e-talk of the journal to know about the latest publications. Thank you very much.